Hello everyone, and a huge welcome to the second edition of the Angular.love Autumn Camp series. This is our second meetup in the camp, and last time we had some fantastic sessions diving deep into signal forms by Fanius Prodamu and signals with Mateusz Stefańczyk. If you missed them, don't worry, the recordings are already available on our YouTube channel, so check those out. I'm David Kostka, and I will be hosting today's event on behalf of the entire Angular.love crew. You might recognize me from my previous meetups, where I was in the role of the speaker. As always, massive thank you to the whole team for all of the effort they've put into preparing these events for you. Today, we are broadcasting straight from the Warsaw, Poland, and you would love to know where you are tuning in from. So drop your location in the comments and say hi. Hey, Samisai. Hey, James. You have few folks from Hamburg. I also see people from Warsaw there, from Bulgaria, and also some exotic countries like Madagascar, as you can see. And also a few people from Tunisia. Okay, I think we can get the presentation started. So it's fantastic to see so many places here and so many community members. Remember that if you enjoyed this meetup, please share the information with it on your social media and invite your friends and colleagues to this free event. Finally, I would like to extend another huge thank you to our amazing sponsor, House of Angular, for their continued support. House of Angular is a software agency that can solve all your Angular-related problems and much more. All right, let's jump straight into today's exciting lineup. First, we have some Vloeberghs who will show us how to be productive by getting the most out of the Angular DevTools. Following Sam, we'll have Daniil Rabizo, which will take the stage and talk about turning your mobile Angular application into a mobile money maker. And lastly, we'll have Mateusz Stefańczyk to tell us what is new in the Angular 21, which was released last week. As always, we will wrap each segment with the Q&A session, so don't hesitate to jump into the chat. Remember, you can always ask questions, share your thoughts, and of course, connect with others throughout the event. We would love to hear from you. And just a quick reminder, our next event will take place on the December 11th, so mark your calendars. Without further delay, I'm thrilled to introduce our first speaker, Sam Vloeberghs. Sam truly understands the Angular ecosystem inside and out. He's an Angular community contributor and, of course, recognized Google developer expert for many years. As an experienced software architect, Sam brings deep technical knowledge into the table, and we are thrilled to have him make his debut at our virtual meetup today. He's here to give us some practical deep dive into the Angular DevTools. Welcome on the stage, Sam.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for the introduction.
Hey, so how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. It's great to see so many people from all over Europe and all over the world, I see. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I also see some Polish people, somebody from Paris. Yeah, a lot of community members. So I think they're interested in the two things, and I've prepared for you two questions. So first one of them, which Angular DevTools feature, in your opinion, is the least used, but actually the most useful?
Cool. There are various very useful features in the Angular DevTools, but if I would need to pick one, it's probably going to be the signal graph, because the signal graph will show you for a very specific component all of the connections that you have for your signals, where it's coming from. So it gives you a clear view of how it's all connected. Allows you to debug properly. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that statement. The signal graph I don't remember if this is still experimental, but this is definitely a very cool feature for the new Angular DevTools.
It's still experimental, but yeah, I think it's now shown by default. But there's still a lot of work to be done on it to make it the best tool that it can be. Yep.
Yeah, and with the release of the Angular 21 last week, which feature of this release is the most important to you?
Well, you might probably expect that I'm going to say the signal forms, but I'm more interested. Well, I do like signal forms, but for me, the ARIA edition is a very cool feature. Angular ARIA for the built-in accessibility primitives. Why? Because many people struggle with building proper accessible components. So when a framework provides those components in a way that you can style them for your own projects, I think we can collectively make less mistakes and create more accessible and better applications for our users.
Yeah, fully agree with you on that statement. Angular ARIA is definitely something new, and it's crazy to me how easily you can style these components. So it's definitely a must-have for the modern Angular developer. And more components, of course, to this library will come soon.
Yep.
So I'm leaving the stage to you, Sam. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining. Today I will be introducing you to the Angular DevTools. We will learn about its goals and history, how we can install and use these tools, and along the way share some more tips and tricks. Before we continue, very short, who am I? I already got an introduction, but I've been playing with the web as a software engineer for close to 20 years now. And my primary focus has always been on the development of the internet. So that focused experience brought me to my current position as a software engineer and also engineering manager at Core Financial. Core is a promising fintech scale-up that started out in the USA, but is already expanding globally. I also serve as a GDE for Angular, and that means that I do work in support of the Angular and the web communities by organizing, presenting, writing, and mentoring other developers. I also have two sons, Milo and Max, and if and when they leave me some energy left, I try to train for a next triathlon race. And if you want to learn more about me or the things that I do, please check out my website. So what are the Angular developer tools? You can think of them as the Chrome developer tools, but with a very clear focus on the Angular fundamentals. It comes as an extension to the browser, and it is shown as a new tab in the Chrome developer tools. It basically allows you to inspect, debug, and profile your Angular applications, and it's kind of like Angular's answer to the React or the Vue DevTools. It replaces the older Augury extension and is now also built directly by the Angular team and its contributors. So in that way, you can consider it to be reliable and staying up to date. It works best with the most recent versions of Angular, but the minimal requirement for the current Angular DevTools is the IV rendering engine. So the older your Angular version, the less features there will be available in the DevTools, as the available features rely on many of the Angular debug internal APIs. So as always, be sure to update your Angular applications as soon as you can, because you will get new features. The DevTools can be installed on most popular browsers like Firefox, Chrome, and Edge, and that basically means any Chromium-based browser on all typical operating systems. The easiest way to install it is through the plugins for your browsers, so the Chrome Web Store, Firefox extensions, or the Microsoft Edge add-ons. Just search for Angular DevTools and click Install. And once it's installed, you will see a new Angular tab in your browser's DevTools, and also on the top right, you will see a new Angular icon in your plugins. And if you want to debug or potentially develop a new feature for the DevTools, you can always check out the dedicated project for it on the Angular GitHub repository. Normally, I would ask a question here on how many of you are using the Angular DevTools, but I cannot see my audience. So if you are using the DevTools, maybe drop a note in the comments, and then I get an idea about the experience that the attendees have with the DevTools. So underneath the DevTools, we have an Angular application. And that Angular application uses the internal debug APIs of the Angular framework. And because of the usage, the extensive usage of those internal APIs, the Angular DevTools only get updated after the related Angular features also become available. And browsers typically update the extensions automatically. So once it's installed, you do not need to care about it. It will auto-update, so you are good to go. And like I said, from there on, it all depends on which version of Angular you are using in the application that you are inspecting. The more recent your version, obviously, the better. And to be able to use DevTools on your running production builds or on your application that you're serving during development, you just need to make sure that the optimization property is disabled during the build phase. And that is because when you would put it to true, the Angular build will remove all non-essential code for running your application, and that means it will also remove the internal debug APIs. So if you set it to true, the DevTools will not recognize your application as being an Angular application. I already noted that the DevTools is just another Angular application running in your browser, but in a different context. For example, in Chrome, that's the Chrome shell. Because of that, it needs a way to communicate with your application directly, and it does this by using the post message API on the global object with some simple events sending data back and forth. Why am I mentioning this? Because some of you might have an application that uses the post message API itself. You will need to account for those events coming into your event system. So just handle those events carefully, and then all will be working properly. So the base functionality of the current Angular DevTools is component inspection, profiling, and injector tree inspection. There are some more hidden and sometimes experimental features that we will explore along the way as well. Let's start with component inspection. Component inspection is very similar to element inspection that is available in the native DevTools in your browser. So as soon as you open up the Angular DevTools, you will see components selected as a default tab, and you can use the top left button to select any Angular related element with your pointer manually, or you can just navigate through the component tree and select the component that you want to inspect from there. When you select a component, a site detail panel will show up with all of its properties available for that component, including also the private properties. And you can use the dedicated icon, the code icon, to navigate directly to the source code in the Sources tab. If you want to debug using the console, you can use the Log in Console button to output the current instance of the selected component in your console. It's good to note here that any component that you select in the component tree will also be exposed with a variable in the console. In this case, the app home component is selected, so you can reference this instance in console using the $ng0 variable. There is some history in these variables, so as soon as you select another one, like for example, if I would select app footer here, then app footer would become $ng0, and app home would still be referenced via $ng1, and so forth. I think up till 5 or something. And as you can see, you also get a glimpse of any of the injected services and their respective injection hierarchy. Showing comment notes is a small but helpful additional feature for you to use during component inspection. You can enable it through the settings. And what it does is basically toggle the comment notes in the component tree that help with any of the special elements that you have used. For example, ng template that handles dynamic content. More examples are, for example, the deprecated structural directives like ngIf or ngFor. And as you can see here in the example, I used an ngIf, and that ngIf, that structural directive will use a comment node to expose the context or all the variables that it had while executing the ngIf. And on the bottom, you see another comment node for a template outlet that was used to project some content. You can also note that let me see, you see my, yeah. For example, here, I use the new control flow syntax with @for. And here you can see that we do not have comment nodes because the new control flow syntax does not rely on the DOM to iterate over its elements. So therefore, there are no comment nodes available here. The comment nodes also become available as interactable nodes. So as soon as you click on them, just like any other component, you can inspect more details about this specific node, and yeah, just read out the values and all of the data that was known at runtime. The next major part of the component inspection is the signal graph. Like I said in the beginning, it's still somewhat of an experimental feature, but by now it's enabled by default. And it became available since version 20.1. But you need to know that the internal APIs to support all of this signal-based things have been building up since signals were initially released, which was, I believe, around version 16. So just either way, consider that this has been an ongoing effort crossing several major versions to get to this point. So when you are inspecting components, you will see a new, it seems that the GIF is not 100% clear, but yeah, okay, you can still read it, I guess. You will see a new button, show signal graph, sorry. And when you click on it, it will enable a bottom pane in the component tree view, and it will show you an overview of all the signals and how they are related to each other for that selected component. Whenever a signal updates because of some data changing or by some events, a user click, for example, the signal graph will give you visual feedback on any of the relevant nodes that receive updates. There are different types of signals, as you know, and they're also visualized with different colors in this graph. The current template will be shown in the gray box. Regular signals are shown in blue. The computed signals are shown in green. Effects are shown in purple. And finally, the linked signals and other complex or composed signals, like, for example, resource, are shown in red. And in this case, we see that there is a template for the app header component that has a linked signal defined. The linked signal relies on a computed value, which is the source. And that source has a reference to another signal, which is in essence just an RxJS interval emitting every 10 seconds. And I just added a very simple effect that logs the current time to show that it will also pop up in the signal graph, and that it has a nice distinct color. Each signal box shows the name of the signal and its value. And when you click on it, it will pop up. It will show you a pop-up with more details. The pop-up contains the name, the value, the type of the signal, but also an epoch number. And the epoch is simply a counter for how many times the value has changed since the signal was originally initialized. The button on top of the pop-up will lead you to the source code in the sources directly where the signal is defined. And like I said, you need to remember that it's still somewhat of an experimental feature. So you might have noticed that some boxes are formatted unexpectedly or are missing some details. Like for example, here you see unnamed for the computed and the signal on top. Those are known issues and shortcomings in the framework that are being addressed and will be fixed shortly, or maybe even today or tomorrow. The final thing I would like to show quickly for the components is how you can use the DevTools to track incremental hydration and deferrable views. But be careful here. In order to use this feature, you will need to turn off hot module replacement, because when hot module replacement is enabled during development, all defer blocks and its dependencies are loaded eagerly. Don't ask me why very specifically why this is needed. I haven't checked the details on that yet, but yeah, just know that this is needed for hot module replacement to function properly. But from there on, it's pretty straightforward. Any block that is deferred from loading on the client side will show as hot defer on the component tree and highlighting that there is a potential placeholder. When you select a node, you will also see more information on this defer block, like what it triggers, and which trigger will actually load the deferred block. And then as soon as it loads, the component tree will update, it will remove the placeholder, and it will show all of the loaded content and components that were part of that defer block instead. That lazy loaded component subtree will also become available, and just like any other component, you will be able to click on it and inspect all of the details in the component tree. When components only hydrate on the client after specific conditions are met, like for example, in this case, when you hover, they are shown with an initial gray icon, which you might barely see here, but it's an icon, a gray icon, indicating that this HTML is not yet hydrated as an Angular component. It's still very raw HTML without any Angular functionality. And as soon as you hover it, so as soon as it hydrates, the bluish drip is shown, indicating that the full functionality for that component is now available, meaning the HTML got properly initialized as a full Angular component. And from now on, you can just inspect the component details as you would inspect any other component detail. Next, the injector tree helps you to inspect Angular's dependency injection system. It visualizes the hierarchy of injectors, like for example, the root injector, component injectors, and all of its services or providers that they contain. And that way, you can see where in the hierarchy any of your services are provided or initialized. This is, for example, useful when debugging services that should be a singleton at all times, but are for whatever reason not, right? They could be scoped on a lower level or provided in somewhere down the tree, so that there are potential multiple instances of a service. So it allows you to track and debug those multiple instances that were maybe set up by design or maybe by mistake. The top level pane of the injector tree shows you the three higher level injectors. It starts with the null injector, it goes down to platform, and after that the root injector. And before we continue, let's do a quick recap about the different injectors. You can think of the null injector as the end of line for Angular. When dependency injection can't find a match anywhere in the other injectors in the tree, the null injector will be the one that raises the red flag and outputs the error to the developer or into the console. The platform injector is the injector that is shared across all applications in a page. So imagine that you would have multiple Angular applications on one page. This injector will allow you to share state between those applications. And then the root injector is the base injector for a single application on your page. All services declaring provided in root will be initially defined in the scope of this injector. Clicking on any of the three boxes in the top level pane opens a details panel on the right side that will list all the available providers for that applicable injector scope. And as you can see, in this case, we clicked on the root injector. And you can also see that we have now listed all the providers for this injector scope, and there's some search functionality that allows you to search by token name or by the type. There's also a bottom panel, the element hierarchy, that allows you to explore any of the elements that can have view providers. And as you can see, those can be any kind of element or directive. And in this case, we see that the footer component has one provider. That means that we specifically provided a service or whatever, or value or sorry, at the providers in the component annotation. So in this screenshot, sorry, I also filtered the elements and the injector hierarchy to show only injectors and elements that have actual providers defined. Those are those two checkboxes on top. And the second checkbox will hide any of the framework specific injectors, allowing you to focus only on your application specific injectors, because you might not be interested in all of the framework provided services. Then compared to the other features, the router tree is a smaller feature that gives you a clear overview of how the router tree in your application is being built up. It's also currently still a hidden feature, I think, that you need to explicitly enable through the settings. And when you open it up, it will show you the router tree as far as it's already known to the application. So dynamically and lazy loaded child routes, they might get only discovered and visualized as soon as you are navigating through your application. The active routes are currently marked with a green background, and any route or its associated code that gets loaded eagerly is marked with a full connection arrow line. So this one here. As you know, this is not ideal because it might increase your initial page load. So when routes are lazy loaded, they are marked with a dotted connection arrow. Same here, you might know that this is more ideal as you are deferring the chunk loading to only loading it when it's needed, when you are visiting this page. Clicking on any node in the router tree will also show you some basic details about this route, like which component is attached, what is the title of this route, and what are some other key properties, like lazy loaded or active. Then the profiler. Profiler is another big feature of the Angular DevTools. It will help you understand how and why your Angular app is re-rendering. But I will be clear from the start that I think that this topic deserves a presentation on its own. You can go very deep on this, and if you already did some profiling in the Chrome developer tools, you might know that there's a lot to it. This is like a research project on its own. It's a very nuanced skill, but I will just show you the basics. So there will be a button available to start recording. And as soon as you hit that button, it will capture some data while you walk through and use the application. It will, for example, track change detection cycles, and the graph will highlight when Angular runs them and how long those change detection cycles take. You can also track component re-renders, so you know which components are updating, how often that they are updating, and how long it takes to render them again. So to summarize, in short, the profiler is like a performance microscope that you can use for your Angular apps, showing what Angular is doing under the hood, and it will help you optimize its performance. There are ways to visualize this performance data with flame graphs, bar charts, and tree maps, which are all plotted on a time axis. So go ahead and explore this, right? Open up the profiler, hit record, and then start using your application. It will show you where things go rogue, where things are going slow, and you can debug from there. Now let's end with the transfer state feature. Transfer state feature only became recently available in version 20.2. And for those who do not know what transfer state is, I will briefly explain. I know from experience during previous talks that there are many people who do not know what it is. So here we go. You might know that Angular is not a client-side only framework, right? You can also render its views and the complete application on the server, or you could statically generate it at any time, any point in time, for example, right after your build phase, if you have like a static website. But why is this? Well, it can help with perceived performance, and pre-rendering your applications might also help with other requirements like search engine optimization, which will improve the indexability and the exploration of your website. So Angular is a client-side JavaScript framework, but also a server-side framework that allows you to load content dynamically, for example, through an API. So imagine a scenario where you have a blog post. The Angular application will load the data from that blog post from a database. It will get back the data and it will render it on the screen. But now imagine that happens first on the server, right? The server initializes your Angular application. It gets the data to show the blog. It serializes the HTML, sends it back to the client, to the browser over the wire. And then as soon as it comes back in the browser, Angular will kick in again, and it will try to rebuild the same page, but potentially also calling that same API again. It will try to fetch the data again. That is double work, right? Fetching the data is done twice. And this is the thing that transfer state tries to avoid, right? So let me explain what happens on the backend, on the server side. When the application renders on the server side, it will call the API, but instead of just visualizing the data that comes back from that API, it will also store that data in the server-side version of the transfer state. Then as soon as the application is stable, Angular will then serialize the view into full-blown HTML, but it will also include the original data from the server inside the HTML. It will send that data together with the full rendered page over the wire to the browser. And then when it kicks in again on the browser side, instead of calling the API again, it will see that there was a cached version of that data sent along with the HTML, and it will get the data from there instead of calling the API again. So that's what transfer state does. It basically works as a bridge for reusing whatever that you fetched on the data for the data on the server. It will reuse that on the browser. So the transfer state feature in the DevTools will show you whatever got serialized, whatever got transferred over the wire to the browser, but you will need to toggle it on. It's not enabled by default, so you need to enable it in the settings here, enable transfer state tab. And as soon as you get this clear overview of the data that got transferred. So it's important to know that this state will not change anymore. This is something that's only relevant for your initial page load. There's no point in updating this because it's only being used to optimize the load from the server to the client to avoid calling the backend again, to avoid calling the API again. So whenever you're using the application in your browser, this will not update anymore. So in that way, it's just a nice and formatted visualization of the state so that you don't need to manually inspect the HTML to debug the transfer state feature. And I can also quickly show that in a demo because this was the end of the theory, let's say, and I can now switch to a very basic demo of all of this. So let me start with the transfer state. So as you can see, you can get a clear overview of whatever was rendered on the server and send along to the browser. And you do not need to manually go view the page source anymore to scroll down and see that that data was actually just here. See, line wrap. So this is how you would debug it before. You would go into the source that got sent from the server to the browser, and you would inspect this, maybe copy paste it into your IDE and then debug it from there. But now it's just taken out of the HTML and shown in the Angular DevTools. Another quick demo that I can show as a last point is the injector tree, which I find very interesting. And for that, I set up a very basic page where we have 3 Angular applications. So when you would go here into the DevTools, you go into the injector tree. You will see here that there are 3 applications, but there are only 2 root injectors, because the second and the third app, or the first and the second app, they are instantiated with the same root injector. So then how can we share those things? How can we share the amount of clicks across those 3 applications? Well, because we use a service, a data service that is shared in the platform. And in this case, it's a shared data service. So the shared data service is available on the platform that allows it to share the state between all of those 3 applications. What else? Let me see. Maybe quickly show you the component tree with the signal graph. Yeah. Right, so there's a lot to explore here, but yeah, this is just a basic demo, which might not show you the full-blown functionality that this provides, but just use it on your big applications and see that the signal graph will allow you to go into your signal store, into your whole architectural setup of your state services, and it will show you how all of your signals are connected, and it will allow you to debug better. All right, that was it for a quick demo. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, let me know here in the comment section, or contact me on social media, preferably on LinkedIn, because I don't regularly check X anymore. But yeah, you know where to find me. Just Google my name and you will find ways to contact me. Thank you.
Awesome. That was excellent presentation. I think we've covered all when it comes to the Angular DevTools. What was shocking to me is the transfer state. Personally, I didn't even know that this feature existed, though I wanted it for like 2 years at least by now. So
okay.
I am really happy with this one, because it will save me so much time by copy pasting this like JSON to my IDE. Yeah, okay. And now it's this time for the Q&A session. I see that we have at least one question currently asked in the chat. So Christian is asking whether updating, I already did it. So does the update introduce better tooling to detect unnecessary component re-renders or signal recalculations?
Yeah, well, it does, right? But if you would want to use a profiler, you would need to dive into how the profiler works. And like I said, this is a very nuanced skill for a web developer. If you want to properly debug and profile your Angular applications, you will need to learn how this works internally. It's not easy, but the the profiler in the Angular DevTools itself will focus on the re-renders, right? But it's up to you to still decide, are these unnecessary re-renders? It's very hard for the DevTools to know this is an unnecessary re-render. That all depends on how you build your application. But it will give you, in your timeline, it will show you how many times it re-renders, and then you can decide from your own expectations, like, this should only re-render when I click on this button. Why does it re-render 3 times before? Then change detection might get triggered somewhere else, right? And then you can look into where those triggers are coming from. So it will only highlight to you that there is something going wrong, but it's still up to you to find out what is causing the unnecessary re-renders or signal recalculations.
Okay, I think that answers the question. Profiler is definitely something that you should take a look. But yeah, as Sam mentioned, it's a complex topic and you need to learn a lot to like understand where the root cause of this particular render issue is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We will wait for a few extra seconds in case anybody else has a question, but I don't see it so far. Oh, okay, I see one. No. Okay, I see a question from Natalia. What do you miss the most in the Angular DevTools?
What do I miss the most? Sometimes it's still a little bit buggy, right? For example, you have those shortcut buttons to navigate to the source of components directly or to the signals. But in my experience, there's sometimes a disconnect. It does not always work properly. So what am I missing? Maybe a little bit more focus of a development on the Angular DevTools, because from what I'm seeing now is that most of the contributions on the DevTools come from contributors and less from the Angular the Angular team themselves.
I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure about anything else. What do you miss in the Angular DevTools?
I definitely miss the transfer state. So far, I think we've got so many amazing features. Like the signal graphs is definitely something that I missed back in the days when signals were introduced. And with the recent like 2-3 versions of Angular, 6th version, 19, 18, I think we've got so many features that I'm no longer missing stuff, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that was it for the questions. So thank you for joining us today, Sam. And
thank you. There's one more question. One more question that I can easily answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
Sami asks, can transfer state be considered like caching data between the server and the client?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you send along the cache from the server to the client. So you're basically transferring the data from your server to your client so that you don't need to refetch it again. So in that way, it is a cache. Yes.
Okay, we can wait for a few seconds more.
It's also a very short-lived cache, right? Because the cache only exists between the phase of rendering it on the server till the rendering in the browser. From there on, it should not be reused because it could already change meanwhile. So it's just a server to browser cache. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I can give also a few words about this one. So basically, your API request will be reused from the transfer state until your application becomes stable for the first time. And this is the exact point at which the request will or will not be used from the transfer state. This is the terminator. Okay, I see we have another question. So MediaSec asks, do we have some control on this transfer state? Because cache sometimes makes some problems for us. Sometimes something was cached and we don't want it.
Yeah, you have total control. It's up to you as a developer to decide, do you want to cache this in the transfer state or not? You decide whether you cache it. So it's not like when you inject transfer state service that it will automatically cache everything that you call from the backend. No, you need to decide which data gets cached and which data that you reuse. You know. So I can maybe quickly show that. Do we still have time? How much time do we have?
Okay. I think we can quickly show it.
Yeah. Need to reconnect here. Should only take a second. Oh. Share screen. Entire screen. Yeah, could you share the other screen, please?
Yes, we're about to. Okay, you're live.
So here, for example, I have a resource signal. Let me make it a little bit bigger. And in the loader, I just decide is this platform server? Yeah, so if we're on the server, we fetch the data and we set that data into the transfer state. So as a developer, you still need to manually call this transfer state enabling. So you can put whatever logic that you want in here. You can say if the name of the post is blah, blah, then you save it. If it's ID 123, then you don't save it. So totally up to you. And then the else statement is the opposite. So is platform browser, for example. In that case, when you are in the browser, you are getting the data from this transfer state. And if there is data, you remove the data again, but you resolve this data as the data that you want to use. And if there is no data, for example, for a new post that got only loaded on the front end, you just fetch the data. So you are totally in control with this.
Okay, I think that answers the question. And this was the last questions. Okay, so Sam, once again, thank you for joining us today. And I hope to see you soon at our future meetups. See you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
So as you may know, with the release of the Angular 21, we've got the experimental version of the signal forms. And with that in mind, our blogger and Google developer expert, Mateusz Stefańczyk, has just published a new workshop on these signals forms. There he will be diving deeply into how the signal forms will differentiate between the reactive forms and, of course, the new signal forms. And he'll go through all of the things that we may expect, the problems that signal forms are trying to solve. And with that workshop and its release, we've got a special premiere for you. Since it is a Black Week, we have a special offer, of course, so you can grab a 1 ticket and 1 free ticket in case you bring a teammate and get, of course, this ticket for free. But in case you're a solo developer, you can always get a 30% discount on single tickets to these workshops. So we've just dropped the link into these workshops and promo codes in the chat. Don't miss it out. Okay, it's time for our next session. Our next speaker is Daniil Rabizo, and he's a man who truly lives and breathes the front-end development. He works as a senior front-end developer on a daily basis, but after hours, Daniil actively shares his knowledge with writing articles or, of course, speaking on the stage. Talking about the stage, welcome on the stage, Daniil.
Thank you. Hi, David.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So I know you have a presentation about the mobile applications in Angular. How did you thought about this concept, and why would you even use the Angular for a mobile application in the first place?
Well, that's a great question. I asked myself this question when I got this requirement first, but I'm not gonna spoil the presentation and tell you more about that in the slides.
Okay, so we'll wait for this one. But I've got also two other questions for you. First one of them, which feature do you like the most from the newest version of the Angular 21?
My favorite feature is signal forms, long-awaited feature, because previous forms, template and React-driven forms had so much boilerplate in them that signal forms now reduce, eliminate, and simplify, and it also reads much intuitively than before.
Yeah, I agree. And the typing is also much better on the signal forms.
Absolutely,
Okay. I also have another question for you. So do you think frameworks like Capacitor or Ionic are ready to work with signals? Do you miss something in there?
They are absolutely ready to work with signals because signals are inside the Angular infrastructure, and Capacitor and Ionic are just wrapping the web application. So they don't interfere with signals anyhow. So you can use any Angular technology as soon as it's released with Capacitor and Ionic inside the mobile applications.
So that's a good news. As the Angular is moving forward, the code is backwards compatible and we don't have much problems with that. Okay, Daniel, whenever you are ready, you can share your screen and of course, begin.
All right. So today I'd like to tell you how you can convert your existing web application into the mobile app, connect in-app payments to it, and make money with it. So I will guide you through the steps that are necessary to convert such an application. And I thought to myself when I got this requirement was, is Angular even a good mobile framework? We all know it's a great web framework, but does it work for mobile applications? Because there are no native mobile features. There is no cross-platform support like in Flutter and React Native, and it's also slower in development, or it used to be slower in development than Flutter or React, because now with Signal Forms, as we just discussed, it's going to be better. But what if after years of development of a big and successful project, a client now wants to target a new platform, create a new revenue source on App Store and Google Play, cost efficiently reuse the same features as for the web application, and also keep the existing code unchanged? And last year, I had such a success story. I created such an application for my client, and I'm not allowed to tell the exact numbers, but in 2 months, it's managed to generate 6-digit revenue. And I'd like to explore the key steps involved into the process of creating such an application. And I remember the day when my client asked me, can we just take our web application, publish it to the App Store? I had so many questions and doubts in my head, like how it's going to look like, how it's going to feel like. Does it work with Angular? So we know there is Ionic framework. Should we introduce it? And so many questions this day, and I responded, absolutely, let's do it right now. But then I faced real challenges. So first of all, we had an existing UI with all the components, with header, with footer, with content, and we know there is an Ionic framework. How can we create a mobile application from that without duplicating the code, creating separate footers, headers, and everything for the mobile device now? And also, many features of this project depended on a browser API for downloading files, for opening links in new tabs, for example, and it doesn't exist on a mobile device. So how do we integrate the mobile API into that? And at the very end, also, there are very strict payment guidelines in the App Store and Google Play, because Apple and Google want to take commission from each payment for your application. And if you try to somehow bypass their payment guidelines, for example, redirect to another payment provider, you're going to be blocked forever at the App Store with this bundle ID. So it's illegal, straight to jail for this at the App Store. And the solution to integrating mobile APIs was to install the Capacitor library, which is, by the way, created by the Ionic framework team. And it's a lightweight library, which is a cross-platform runtime for the web applications. So it just wraps the web application inside a mobile app. And you can write your project once in Angular, for example, and build it for iOS and for Android at the same time. And this way, there is no need for Ionic components, dependencies, because it just wraps the web view and provides a bridge between the Angular code or backend code and the device API. So there are a lot of features which Capacitor has, like camera, file system access, geolocation, haptics, basically everything the device can do, you can do with your Angular application. And in many applications like this, which support both web platform and mobile platform, you will see constructions like this. So if we are in a mobile platform, call the mobile logic. If we are in a web browser, call the browser logic. And this is what we generally want to avoid at any cost, because this if-else logic will spread all over the application and the code will become unmaintainable, and we want to avoid this. So we had an NX monorepo with one application, so we added another one there, and we had around 70 feature libraries in this NX monorepo. And the question is, how do we introduce mobile API there in the existing features? So, for example, if we wanted to open the new link in a browser, it's not possible anymore on the mobile. So how do we introduce mobile logic in here without changing anything in the existing code? And the solution to this is to hide this behind an interface, for example, link opener, which has an open method, and create two separate implementations of this interface, one for mobile and one for web. So the one for web just calls the already known window open, which opens a new tab. And for the mobile device, we create a separate implementation which opens the in-app browser, completely separate logic. And in order to call this logic correctly from the shared feature, we can provide a necessary service with the injection token. And injection token is, in my opinion, a feature that makes Angular stand out from all other frameworks because it lets you create really flexible constructions. And in your shared features, in your existing code, it's sufficient to just depend on the abstract interface, on the abstract logic. And there is no need to tell, do you want to open the in-app browser or something in the new tab? And a very important point is that the application has to support proper mobile user experience, because when you submit your application to the App Store, real people, real testers will download it and test it and check it for accessibility, for usability, for some red flags, which I'm going to mention further. And the application simply has to look good. It has to have the mobile-first design, adapted very well, usable, and layout has to be optimized for mobile. And in a browser, we have these buttons for back and forth navigation. Of course, it doesn't exist on a mobile device, so you have to implement the gesture support so that user can navigate the app without the browser controls. And also, you can implement push notifications to be able to engage with your users, and it will also make your mobile application different from the web application, because it's also a very important point for the submission review. And when you are developing such an application, how can you really deploy it? How can you publish it to the App Store and Google Play? So you have to download the Xcode and Android Studio, register your accounts and at Apple and Google, and you will have to create a bundle ID for your application, which is unique. So the application can have a logo, a name, a description, screenshots, anything, and it can change over time completely. But your bundle ID always stays the same, because this is a unique identifier of your application. If your application gets banned for some violations by bundle ID, so it's you will have to create another one. And with Xcode and Android Studio, you can publish your application, and it takes, in my experience, 2 days on average for the application to be reviewed and feedback to be provided to you, or it can be approved and you can publish it right away. And what is actually about the in-app payments? Because this is the reason why we would create such applications, right? So you need a payment provider in order to implement the in-app payments, because Android and Apple have completely separate implementations of payments. And from your Angular code, and also from your backend, you'd like to call a single API in order to handle the purchases. And also a payment provider, which is a nice bonus. They provide some informative statistics, dashboards, where you can see how many users have bought some product, or how much time does it take for a user to download your app and then proceed to the first purchase. This is very informative statistics. And for the payment providers, there are two key players on the market right now. These are RevenueCat and Conversion. Conversion is a bit more affordable compared to RevenueCat to a certain degree, because up to a certain revenue, you don't pay anything, and you start paying once the revenue exceeds some threshold. But RevenueCat has better documentation, in my opinion. It has bigger clients, so we perceived it as a safer option, so we went with RevenueCat. And once you have selected the payment provider, you register there, and you have to create your in-app products at Apple and Google separately. These are the products which are going to be purchased by the users. And once you created them, you can import them to the payment provider in one place and then fetch them from your payment provider to your application. And I will explain how it works when you, with a concrete example of Angular and some backend, for example. When you want to show the list of products, you have to call the getProducts method of your payment provider. You get the list, each item has an ID. You can show it with such nice cards with the button purchase. And once the user presses this purchase button, you call the purchase method of the payment provider with an ID. And what it does is you are probably very familiar with that. It opens the native pop-up where user can confirm the purchase with a Face ID or a password from the Google account. And while all this purchase is happening, after it happened, the payment provider has to call an endpoint on your backend, and you have to implement an endpoint so that you can receive the status of your purchase and save to the database that, okay, this user has this product, and after user can log out and log in, your application will show or unlock some features for this user that user has paid for. And very important, while all this payment process with your payment provider and backend is happening, your frontend has to somehow get the information that the payment was successful or not. And for this, you can implement polling. For example, you can poll your backend status endpoint every 5 or 10 seconds until you get a status of the purchase. It can be a success, it can be an error, it can be a timeout. And user has to get some feedback that, okay, this purchase was successful now. And you also have to refresh the application to unlock the features for the user. And at this point, I have invested already 2 months of work, and it still wasn't guaranteed that the application will pass through the Apple and Google submission reviews, because some guidelines are really, really tricky, and you have to pass through 2 reviews, once at Apple, once at Google. And by the way, every time you submit any minor bug fix, your application goes through this review every time. And some guidelines are really frustrating, so we have to study them very carefully. For example, if you try to avoid the payment procedure of Apple and Google by not paying them the commission for redirecting somewhere, you will get an instant ban by the bundle ID. So the application is not allowed to be published on the App Store anymore. And they will also check your web application, your website, when they download, the testers download your application. And if the mobile app is just a repackaged web application with no added value, they will also reject it because it doesn't provide any experience that the user expects from the mobile app. Or for example, of course, you would like to target both platforms, Apple and Google, and if accidentally you mention Google Play or Google or Android or something in your iOS application, they will also reject it. They will provide a feedback to remove it, but it won't pass through the review. And also, they don't like if you create an MVP and you are teasing some functionality with coming soon, this is coming soon, they will also reject it because the app doesn't look ready when you have these placeholders. And if your application, just by its concept, is another calculator with in-app payments, which are already thousands on the App Store, they will also reject it because it doesn't provide any additional experience to the users, and they don't want such application on the App Store. But we were lucky enough, and we studied the guidelines carefully, and we were happy to publish the application at the first try. And after all these steps were done, you can publish your application and profit from it. And on the screen, you see a QR code to my YouTube channel where I show you more insights about front-end development, about Angular, and about software development in general. So please subscribe.
Wow, that was a really great presentation. I think we all, as the Angular developers, should definitely explore the mobile environment. Yeah, as you mentioned, the injection tokens is something that makes Angular definitely great for using our existing business logic. Okay,
Absolutely.
I see. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, with other frameworks, you would have to implement it by your own.
Yeah, and that may be a lot of work. Okay, so we had first question, but Jerome already answered it. You can also give our response to this one. So, is the Angular team planning to create their own framework for mobile devices?
Well, I'm not on an Angular team, but I would think they would not, because there are already a lot of existing technologies, and the demand is not very big for that, for Angular mobile apps. Only if you have an existing application and you want to transform it, but I think Capacitor and Ionic are doing a great job with that.
Yeah, fully agree on this one. Angular often loves to reuse the stuff that community have built. So for example, we don't have Angular specific state management library from the Angular team. We use the NGXS, NGRX, and other libraries. Okay, I also see a question from Natalia. What do you miss the most in the Angular when it comes to building applications that run on mobile devices?
I never had any problems with Angular inside the mobile apps, because the mobile web view is just a web browser, right? But the trickiest part of creating mobile applications from the front-end frameworks is that you have to handle Android and iOS at the same time. And sometimes they have separate configurations, they have separate edge cases, features, different updates. So for example, Android can support, from some update, they support edge to edge, from the edge of the screen to the edge of the screen, and your application immediately looks bad on that. You have to consider that. So all difficulties are connected with the mobile platforms and with their specifics, not with Angular.
Yeah, agree on this one. Okay, we also have another question. So how about if the app has an authentication at first? How the Apple Android team is going to test it? This is a good question, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you submit your application, you submit some metadata about your application. For example, they need a test user, of course, to log in and check everything, check the pages. You have to submit someone who can pick up the phone if they have any questions, and your website, information about your app. So there are a lot of forms you have to fill in order to submit your application, and one of them are the test credentials that they can use.
Okay, that answers this question fully. Okay, we have another question. If you were to build a mobile app from scratch, would you use Ionic or Capacitor?
Well, if I would build a mobile app from scratch, I wouldn't use any of that. I wouldn't even. Well, Angular is a great web framework, but for the mobile app, there are better suitable technologies, I would say. So this is a great use case for existing Angular application, because you don't want to rewrite the whole app, which was already programmed for years. It's not worth it. But for new applications, I would probably pick something else. Also, it depends on the requirement. Maybe you want completely separate applications.
Yeah, so to summarize, Angular is very good for writing mobile applications in case you already have a web application. And I will also add a note to this question. Ionic is just the UI library. It does not include any platform-specific logic. Basically what I mean, you can have a mobile Angular application without Ionic, but capacitor is what you must have in case you're writing a mobile app. So yeah, okay. I also see another question. So is it possible to create a native iOS widget, a small part of your app? How does it work with system notification?
Do you mean with widget? Do you mean a widget that you can install on the home screen, or do you mean the in-app, the push notifications? Because I'm not aware if you can do the widget, because Capacitor and Ionic are just wrapping your web application, right? So for widgets, you would need probably a different solution. But push notifications and system notifications are possible, yeah. So you can do them. It supports them.
Okay, Andrei, please confirm if this answers your question.
Great.
Okay. Okay, I think this is it when it comes for the questions. Thank you so much for your presentation. This was a lot of insights, especially about the approval process for the applications.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. See you next time.
See you. Bye.
So now it's time for our final, highly anticipated session. As many of you may know, just last week we received a brand new major version of the Angular, version 21. The ecosystem is moving fast, and all we want to know what changes and the new features we can expect from this new Angular update. Our next speaker is someone whom for sure many of you know. It is Mateusz Stefańczyk, and he's not only a Google developer expert, but he's also the one driving the forces behind Angular.love community. Matt has spoken at many meetups and conferences across Europe, and recently he decided to take things a step further by making his sessions more interactive and by leading the Angular workshops that help others better understand our favorite framework. Welcome on stage, Mateusz.
Hello everyone. Thank you, David, for this warm welcome.
So how are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing fine, pretty fine. Already, will be finishing my work. Behind the windows, it's already dark, so pretty. I don't like this kind of the weather. Don't like the winter and so on, because it's getting dark pretty fast, and then you finish your work, but you feel like it's already night and there is nothing else to do. But despite of that, it's fine. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm also doing really great. I'm having a lot of fun today with being MC on this meetup.
Is it first time you're the MC?
Yes, it is the first time that I'm actually the MC, so definitely it's a completely new experience for me.
But yeah, you're doing great, so you should be happy.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, Matt, so I've got two questions for you, and the first one of these two being, of course, what is your favorite feature from the Angular 21? And I will give you a small block. You cannot pick the signal forms.
Okay, I cannot pick the signal forms. That's, I think, like the Angular area, I would say, yeah? So Angular area, the new set of these accessible components, it will be growing, and I think we'll have a lot of fun, and it will be extremely useful for us in the future, where the libs will be more popular, we'll have more components, and I believe that will be feature building block of majority of Angular apps. So yeah, I was thinking about maybe making the Vitesse the default one or something like that, but Angular area is winning.
Yeah, Angular area is pretty cool, and you can build your own components by just applying the styles, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, I also have another question for you related to the signal forms. What is the single most important problem that the signal forms are trying to solve?
So if I would have to say, in my opinion, there is a lot of problems that they actually solve. There is a lot of problems, or maybe not the problems, but inconvenience in terms of using the reactive forms and the signal forms. But let's say it's really providing the typing, the proper typing to our forms. That will be my pick.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that the signal forms will streamline. Okay, this was all from my questions. You can start your presentations.
I was a little bit stressed, but yeah, I hope I was able to answer. Okay, so I will share my screen. Give me a second. Okay, I believe it's that one. So I will move everything here that makes sure I can see the chat and so on. So as I already mentioned, and then during this talk with David, you probably could hear something about myself. Also, you heard what we will be talking about. So today we're gonna discuss Angular 21, which in compared to Angular 20, I think is pretty great release, provide a lot of improvements. And today we'll try to get over them a little bit, deep dive for some of them more. Other one will only briefly show what they provide, what is the specific improvement behind the change. So let me start. So we will take a look at the signal forms, which I believe is like one of the most awaited feature and missing part of the signal-based API in Angular currently. I don't know whether there are some other awaited signal APIs, but that one was one of the most awaited. We'll discuss about the Vitest, the new default test runner for the Angular, what it brings, and what might be some kind of the tricky things in terms of migrating from some existing tests, especially when we will be fully zoneless. We'll discuss about the zoneless, which is finally confirmed. Oh, sorry. We'll take a look at the Angular area. So the set of the accessible components we already discussed, and some other smaller changes, but they strongly focus probably mostly on some kind of the typing, which brings better developer experience overall to Angular. And we'll take a look what next, what we can do actually with these changes. So let's start with the signal forms, which became experimental, but in my opinion are really the game changer. So if we take a look at the reactive forms. I bring there just reactive forms because those are the forms I mostly used to work in my career as Angular developer. I know that in the recent months, years also, a lot of people used to work with template-driven forms, and there was kind of the hype around the template-driven forms. I have no much experience regarding them, but I still believe like the signal forms will replace reactive forms or just template-driven forms. One of the weak points or problems with reactive forms, especially for me, was the one I mentioned at the very beginning. So it was like weak typing, no native reactivity with signals. That's also kind of the big bottleneck when everything around your component is actually on the signals, but the one missing part are your forms. And right now, whenever you want to listen for value changes, you want to synchronize your model with form and so on, you have to mix these two patterns, RxJS and signals between each other, and it's not always easy to get them synchronized. So that was causing a lot of issues. And as an extra step, I added there the complex cross-field validation, which might not seem that obvious at the beginning, but when you play around with the signal forms and the way that you can create the validators here, you will definitely treat it as some problem. So the basic signal form we can create by importing the form function from the Angular package. Then we we can declare our model, like we can declare it or we can pass it directly as a first argument of the form function. I declare it here as a completely separate one, and then I will talk a little bit more about this model, because right now the model with which we are just initializing our form is playing the extremely important role in entire management of our form. And then by passing this model, which have to be writable signal, we are just creating the form. And like entire typing system and so on here within the signal form is that this form will be created with two properties like email, password. Both of these properties will be fully typed as expected value with type string. So we don't have to say anything like due to the proper usage of the TypeScript and then having the fully typed functions, Angular can infer these types by default without like declaring anything. So in reactive forms, we can say like we also had the typing, but have to be honest, I spotted like much more untyped form group and so on than actually properly typed forms. So that was the reality of reactive forms and the typing. So form creates a form from the signal. Model is a signal which performs automatic synchronization. About this synchronization, I will talk a little bit later. And it's being fully typed, right? So as I said, TypeScript knows everything and is able to propagate the right type directly to each kind of the fields that will be part of our form. There is no classes needed like form builder, or if you would like to add some extra property or something, you're just changing your model and that's directly being propagated to the form. You don't have to use like form control saying that something will be form control, something will be form array, or even the form group. Everything is directly taken from your model and propagated to the form. And as I mentioned about the typing, I would like to mention it's also here because it's pretty tricky and showing how resistant and like well done is the typing in terms of the signal forms. So first of all, right now we are binding our form controls or the fields because it's not more like form control, but form properties, form fields to the new field directive. So right now, everything what is part of our form and is kind of the control of our form in this reactive nomenclature will right now be binded to the field. And it doesn't matter whether that was the form control or that was the form array, there is no distinguish. There is no more need for form control, for control name, for array name, or anything like that. Everything will be binded directly to the field. And also what is worth to mention in terms of the typing, that right now, if I will try to take this input and change it type to be number, my compiler will throw us an error, right? So even on the level of the HTML and its like native attributes of the HTML tags by setting the input to be number, Angular is able to validate it to the in compared to the binded control, right? So the email is the string, but I trying to bind it to the input, which is type number. And this, it will already throw an error. So it's something that was completely not possible with, let's say, binding there the form control name and providing the string with the name of our control. So Angular will not validate it at all. Then we have also like a completely new way of providing the validators. And the first thing which is noticeable is that we are just providing all kinds of the validators as a second parameter of the form function. In compare to the reactive forms, when we have been setting the validators next to the declared control, right? So we could easily find out that for email, let's say we have the validators like required, email, mean length, and so on. Sorry, so for pretty big forms, which would like to declare all kinds of the validators here as a second parameter, it might be pretty tricky, and maybe this readability is not that great. So that is one thing I found like being kind of the disadvantages. But rest of the stuff is definitely on the side of the signal forms. As it was in the reactive forms. Right now, Angular also providing for us the complete set of the various validators, these most basic ones like required, email, min length, and so on. Actually, what we have to do, we have to like pass it, like trigger them as a part of this function, which being the second parameter of our form function. With the path, we have an access to all of the properties in our form tree, and then we invoking the dedicated validator function with the field we expecting to apply the particular validator, and that's it. So they are more declarative. They also can be done based on some schema functions. So we will discuss the schemas later. The access to the errors is pretty simple. Right now, everything in scope of the forms became the signal. So we are accessing like our control as a signal, and then we are reading the properties, which also being the signals. So I believe this kind of the syntax might be quite confusing at the very beginning, that we have to like invoke the function twice. We will probably need to get used to that one. But also we have to keep in mind that everything we are discussing right now being experimental, right? So maybe even in this area, some stuff will change. But so far we have an access to the error list using this error signal property. And then our error will have like the kind property indicating the error type. And we'll have the error message, which is kind of the optional message for our error, which we can apply when we working with some custom validators and we are creating the custom type of the error and custom message for this particular error. Okay, so everything, like every field state we used to work with in reactive forms and were aware of right now becoming the signals. So whether we want to access the value, errors, whether our control is valid, invalid, touch, dirty, disabled, pending, every single property like that became the signal, and we can very easily consume them or compute from them some other signals by utilizing them in scope of the computed and effects. Yeah, exactly, Sas. So signal is everywhere right now. So I mentioned that we'll discuss a little bit more about this model, because I believe that the model is kind of the new word in terms of the forms, and it's extremely important. But also it might be confusing, because right now also Angular provide us with new input, which is also called the model. It's also providing the full synchronization and also providing two-way data binding, right? So we have to keep in mind that the signal we are just initializing the form with is kind of the form model. And probably this kind of the word will be used for this particular signal, even though it's normal writable signal or linked signal, we will call it like form model. So we declare the model like the traditional signal. What is important that it might have to be writable signal, and then we initialize the form with this particular signal. So this part we already discussed, but what is extremely important that right now, whenever we want to update our form, we don't have to go directly and manipulate the form value as it was in the reactive forms, right? So in the reactive forms, we had like some initial object, and then we have been mapping all of the properties from initial object to this particular form, and form had like its own state, and this object was at the initial state. When you have been updating the form, nothing was changing in scope of this initial object. So it's not case in the signal forms. So right now, when you're updating the model you have been initialized your form with, your form will directly reflect this model immediately, right? So if we want to update, let's say, the proprietary email or the name that being displayed in scope of our form, we just update this property in scope of our we can update it directly in scope of our form, but also we can update it directly in scope of our writable signal. So there are two ways. If I will say like, here, instead of this person form name value set, I will say like this person name set and set the value. This change will be directly also reflected in the form. So that is kind of the two-way model form synchronization. And I believe like this way of manipulating the form by setting directly the model instead of the form will be more expected and considered as a good practice. So what I want to say is that this being propagated and also provided in scope of the Angular documentation examples. So that's my thoughts, but maybe we haven't figured out yet the best practices in terms of the signal forms, but I believe this will be one of them. Okay, so as I said, like the cross-field validation will be extremely simple, and then like creating the validator overall is extremely simple. Maybe it was not tough in the reactive forms, but also it was not so easy and accessible as it is right now. For this purpose, we have like simply the validate function, which we again, as a first argument, provide the name of the property or field we would like to perform validation on. And as a second argument, we are just getting the access to entire form. And here we can say, extract the value of our password property, and then we check whether like the confirm is exactly the same, like the current value of confirm is exactly the same as the password. If it is, it's fine. If not, we just return the error with kind of mismatch and the message password not match. So it's extremely easy right now, and it was not that easy in the past. Okay, so I mentioned about the schemas. And the schemas actually are some kind of the reusable validators, validation schemas. We call them validation schemas. So they are extremely useful when you have a few forms which have to be validated based on exactly same requirements. And you don't want to repeat your validators multiple times and so on. Let's say that the good example here is like an address form. So if you are working on e-commerce or this kind of the stuff, you know that you have to like get the access or address from your customer multiple times. So to get the delivery address or some payment related address and so on. So you'll have to repeat it form by form. But right now you can define a single schema for the defined model, in this case address. And then you simply apply this schema by calling apply function. You provide the property or control to which the particular schema should be applied. And since that point, the billing object with which we initialize our form will be validated based on this schema. So it's provide a great reusability, and I believe it will also provide some changes, architectural changes to the way we organizing our models. Maybe directly next to the model, we will be creating the schema and so on. We will see how it will evolve. Okay, so also I was afraid when I was looking through the Angular forms and especially the signal forms that there is no debounce. And debounce was one of the widely used in terms of forms pipe like RxJS operator, especially to any kind of the search or autocomplete input. Whenever you have to like perform some search but give the user a time to actually type. So there was no way. There were some custom solutions created by the community, but finally Angular provided us with predefined and built by then the bounce. So we apply it exactly same way as we do with the validators. We invoking the dedicated function. We provide the property and the time after which, how long this the bounce actually should take. Extremely simple, and I am extremely happy that it's actually here. Yeah, so that's it in terms of the forms. So as already David mentioned, If you would like to get deeper into signal forms, I strongly encourage you to take a look at my latest workshop, which will take place next year. Right now, for the Black Week, we have the dedicated promotion, let's say, that you can buy like one for yourself and one for your colleague, or if you are sure you will be going only by yourself, you can get the 30% discount for this single ticket, right? So you can buy two just for one, or just single one with the discount of 30%. So during this workshop, I would like to get very deep into the signal forms. So I strongly encourage you, if you are planning to be up to date with the signal forms, would like to become the expert, or you're just planning to migrate your reactive forms to the signal forms. So we would like to invite you, and every step of like migrating and so on will be covered during this workshop. Okay, so right now let's take a look at the Vitess, which is the new default test runner for the Angular. So under the recent years, we know that the Karma will be deprecated. The web test runner was like kind of the potential replacement for the Karma. We probably get to, and probably majority of us has been working with the Jest, which had the great community support, but was fully Node.js based. There were some TypeScript and some modules problem. And the Vitess was kind of the newer candidate with the browser mode. So this browser mode have been making it like the great candidate in terms of replacing the Karma. And right now we have like the final decision. Oops, sorry. That since Angular 21, the Vitess will be the default test runner for the Angular. So whenever we would create right now the new application with ng-new, it will go directly with the Vitess. So why the Vitess one? It was that, first of all, it had the browser mode. So it was running, and it is running the test very similarly to what the Karma used to do. So the migration will be easier. There is no problem with SM modules like it was in the Jest, that we had to like a lot of transformation, and like next point says it's TypeScript first, so we needed some extra types libraries and so on. None of them is needed with the Vitess anymore. And it's get huge community. And what is extremely important, that Angular is constantly trying to get closer and closer to the JS ecosystem, and what actually some other frameworks are doing, whether that was with the signals or whether that was with some more functional approach in a lot of areas in scope of the Angular. The Vitess is like the next step. It's also built by the Vue.js team, and it's being very well opinionated in the Vue community, let's say. So for completely new applications, you actually don't have to do anything if you would like to use the Vitess. So whenever we create the new app, it's by default there. So, but we have to keep in mind that if we would go with some kind of the Zone.js Vitess-based application, and this app already exists, or you are just get used to write tests for the fully Zone-based applications, you can no more use like fake async or wait for async and this kind of the time-based operators. You have to use, provided by the Vitess, like use fake timers in the before each, and after each you will have to reset them, right? So I am not able to cover it during this presentation, like entire nomenclature and best practices in terms of like testing with the Vitess. Maybe I will do like another presentation fully dedicated for this testing tool. But based on these examples, you can actually see what are the differences and how we have to wait for the set timeouts and so on. So migration, Angular, like if you have already existing application, Angular provided the dedicated schematics to migrating your code. But we have to keep in mind that there might be some kind of the issues during this migration. So even those time-based operation, as I showed you, might cause some kind of the issues. Okay, so zoneless. I think like we heard about the zoneless for extremely long time, and if we take a look, it's already with us from version 18 as being an experimental, then it was the developer preview, then stable, and finally it's the default one for all kind of the new applications. So we are actually fully zoneless in the 21. If we create the new app or we would like to migrate the existing app, everything is there and ready. Based on Google statistics, like 50% of new apps already in 2024 were zoneless, 100 of apps in the production. It's default since mid of 2024. And from the worldwide, there is like 1,400 public zoneless apps, and it's based on the HTTP archive data. So what are the benefits actually of the zoneless? Because we talk a lot about the zoneless. So first of all, our app will load faster, but it's mostly, maybe not the mostly, but strongly related with the point 3, which says that we will save the 13 kilobytes of the application size. There is no more monkey patching of the events, so we have an access to native async, await. It's easier to debugging because the clean stack trace is right now, so we can easily see what kind of the issue occur, and it has much better compatibility with some other libraries. Yeah, so mostly that's it. So the migration for the zoneless, we can use the MCP for that purpose. We have to provide the experimental zoneless change detection because like we know that we are without the zone.js, but the change detection still is like improving over the time and will continue improving. So we have to provide it. New apps will be automatically zoneless. The new ones required the migration, and MCP tool from Angular already provides some kind of the migration plan. So if you would like to do it with some AI agent and so on, and we'll connect it with Angular MCP, there are dedicated migration plans that we can access through this MCP server. Okay, so right now we are in the Angular area, which is also in the development preview. And Angular area is kind of the new headless components without the styles. What they actually provide for us are the set of the components or directives that have the full functionality built under the hood to perform in the accessible manner with area built in, fully based on the signals, but they are not providing us any kind of the styling. So we are getting the behavior, which is fully supporting the accessibility, but we don't have any kind of the styling. So we can think of that right now in scope of the Angular, we have 3 kind of the component options. One of them are Angular area, another one is CDK and Angular material. So Angular area and CDK, they a little bit overlap. And when I was on the meeting with Angular core team, when they have been announcing the Angular area, they said like, if you're already using the CDK, you are fine with staying with CDK. But when you're starting the completely new project, they will recommend to go with Angular area. So if we'll take a look what they are giving us, so Angular area is fully headless, full style control is given to the user, and accessibility is built in, and it's in the state of developer preview. CDK provides us the behavior primitives, drag and drop, which is not yet supported in the Angular area, overlays as well, and it's stable. And we have the Angular material, and Angular material is different from the Angular area and CDK, that it's actually provide the fully styled components based on the material design with theming support. We don't have to bother with any kind of the accessibility things when we are using the Angular material. They should be responsibility for covering all of this stuff for us. So right now, let's move to all of these smaller changes I have mentioned at the very beginning. So first of all, the simple changes model became generic. So right now we will be able to fully type it and say by providing the generic type, what's the type of the expected changes. The next one is that we don't have to provide the HTTP client anymore. It will be available for us by default. We can utilize the regex in scope of the template. So we can right now declare some let variable that will have some function declaration or just regex function declaration, which then we can perform validation based on. So yeah, some kind of the nice improvement, but not sure whether will be widely used. We have the ng class and ng styles migration. So there are dedicated schematics for do that one. So we don't need the ng class. Right now, we will be able to bind directly to the class after this migration and since version 21, which should give us like smaller bundle size because we don't have to import any kind of the directives anymore. Key value right now accepts some objects with optional keys without throwing an error, which was not the case in the past. So right now our user might have some kind of the optional properties and we can iterate over it with the key value type. Our HTTP response get the new property, which is called response type. And based on that we can check what is the response type, whether it's basic, coarse, or some other types. And what's important that it will be easier for us to perform some kind of the debugging throughout our HTTP responses. Okay, the defer allowing us to define some custom intersection observers. So right now we can define some custom root margin based on which we should perform the preloading of the component in scope of the defer block. We can also define some visibility threshold. So we have the better control over lazy loading the components with the defer. Also, Angular provides some new stuff to the MCP server. So right now, our AI, when we connect it with the Angular MCP, will have an access to Angular best practices. It can move directly through the Angular documentation, which also very often being updated, has some great docs here. So I strongly encourage you to sometimes take a look over the Angular documentation. You can find a lot of new stuff being added there. You can find some examples, migration plans, AI tutor, or Modernize, which is an experimental migration MCP. So in summary, what's being ready to use? For sure, the Vitest, zoneless HTTP client, simple changes, and binding to ng class and ng style migration. What is right now for the testing purpose and we should consider before using directly at the production are the signal forms, Angular area, and some of the MCP Modernize tool. So what's next? Let us play around with the signal forms, get as much bugs as we can, and provide this feedback to the Angular team. We should try to migrate to the Vitest if we still being on the Karma or Jest. We should consider zoneless for new project, but for existing one as well. Play around and get familiar with Angular area, because as I said, based on this discussion I had, it will be the future over the CDK, maybe at some point. And connect your AI assistants with the latest MCP and get as much as you can from that one. So that's it. Thank you.
Wow, Matt, thanks for your insightful presentations. As you already had on the slide, now we'll move on into the Q&A session. And currently I don't see any questions in the chat, so we must wait for a minute.
Okay. I think like a lot of people probably already also has been familiar with some changes, because our community is extremely, curious proactive. So they probably track the release day. They probably tracked our article, Angular team article, and so on. But I am still extremely happy that there was quite a lot of people during this talk live with us.
I fully agree with you on that statement. Okay. So I see a question from Natalia. And it is, what surprised you the most in the new Angular version?
What surprised me the most? Let me think. So maybe this positive surprise was the bounce. I released about it pretty late, and that's the stuff I was afraid of. So even when I was doing some workshops regarding the Angular, and I have been mentioning there like Angular forms, I was saying like, there might be problem with the bounce. They might be like, we will have to move between RxJS and the Signal forms to get the most from the forms actually, and the Signal forms to utilize some very useful pipes. And one of them was the bounce, because when I checked my project, I saw like the bounce is extremely widely used across of the various forms. But right now with the bounce being here, I am a little bit calmer, let's say. So that was one of them.
I'm also sure we have a lot of time until the Angular team refines this form solution. So we might see more improvement.
But I'm afraid if that will be the case, I don't see right now easy way to migrate, to be honest, by some schematic, right? So maybe I missed something, but I believe it wouldn't be that easy to migrate utilizing schematic. Like run schematic and that your forms being migrated.
I was also afraid of this one particular issue, but I talked to my colleague and he mentioned that the Signal forms will be backwards compatible with the existing control value accessors.
Yes,
so
with the
this
control
is definitely a good thing.
Yes, it will be compatible. So it means like if you're the author of a UI library, you don't have to migrate your UI library for the purpose of the Signal forms. But I am looking more at this TypeScript side of our forms, right? So plenty of people create some abstract classes to simplify creating the forms, form groups, form controls, and so on, right? So I don't know whether it will be that easy to migrate some huge Angular projects.
Yeah, this will be definitely a real challenge in the production applications.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that we have another few questions. So let's start with this one. How can we launch Angular AI tutor locally in a new project?
To be honest, I didn't try it out, but I believe if it's being your MCP, right, and you just connect your AI agent or your IDE, which have like some AI related features, and you set up your MCP here, you will be able to run your AI tutor from there. It's like AI tutor, you have the exact name, so you have to take a look at this particular MCP to get this interactive AI tutor for Angular. But I was not running it by myself, have to be honest with you guys.
Okay, we can move on to the next question. And it is, with these major changes and optimization, can Angular become the front-end go-to for the enterprise apps other than Vue and React?
Yeah, so I believe like right now Angular is actually front-end to go if you ask about the enterprise apps. So it's became even more right now. And if we track like some kind of the performance benchmarks when Angular was released with all the zoneless and finally getting to the signals, we could easily spot that it's outperformed some frameworks like React. It was getting close to the Solid. So I believe like it will become closer to be kind of the more popular framework if we talk about being popular and chosen by the companies. But I'm not sure if at any time in the future it will get close to the React because maybe Vue is not that far. I don't know what is the market for the Vue, But we know for React, it's extremely huge market. It's being using because it's extremely lightweight, easy to start some idea. But when we start idea and it's became fully valuable product, we don't often decide to rewrite it from the scratch or just swap the framework immediately. What is also the problem for Angular, that if you go to some AI tooling and you ask, hello, I would like to write an application that will do, I don't know, some stuff, business related stuff, renting the videos or selling something, AI mostly will prompt you like, if you, and you ask about the stack, it mostly will prompt you to go directly with Next.js, some React-based solution, Express, and so on. If you add to the prompt word, I'm trying to build the enterprise huge application, it will probably prompt you with going to Angular, right? So Angular is being considered as one of the greatest framework for enterprise application, but yeah, it's not being so popular, and even AI in majority of cases will recommend some other tools. So that's the problem Angular is facing, and I don't know whether it will overcome it someday.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, but definitely Angular sees a good future, in my opinion, especially with these MCP tools. They're trying to make more and more AI integration, and of course, for something that Angular is famous for, the guidelines for doing the things. So we have standardized forms. We don't have 10 libraries to do the forms. We just have one. And This is really cool. Okay, we have next question. Can we use Angular ARIA and CDK together? If not, then what is the better as of now?
Yeah, so I didn't try it, whether we can use them together. I believe we can use them together, but in the manner that we utilizing from the CDK what ARIA don't have. So because there is no other purpose, right? So I don't see the space that they will have to overlap in exactly same functionality. They have like the dedicated areas that we can use them. And Angular ARIA is not covering right now everything that CDK provides. But as I said, like Angular team mentioned that if you will be starting something new right now, they will probably choose Angular ARIA over the CDK. Yeah, so that's something we should keep in mind. Maybe mix them together, like use ARIA for everything that you can cover when you're getting stuck and there is no exact component in scope of the Angular ARIA, go with the CDK and migrate when the replacement will be as part of the Angular ARIA. That's how I will do it.
Yeah, and also go ahead, check out the documentation. They've got many descriptions which and when to use different solution. So for example, in case you need drag and drop, you just go ahead for the Angular CDK. But in case you want to write a custom component, it's likely that you need to use the Angular ARIA. Okay, we'll move on into the next question. So it's about an opinion. Despite the new signal forms features, don't you think the old validations were clearer and more structured?
Yes, so they were. That also I have mentioned when I compare them next to each other, that by looking or just when you have been searching like what kind of the validators being applied for the particular field, you could easily go to the place where you declare your form, search for a particular field, and next to it you already saw all kinds of the validators that being applied to that one. Right now it might be part of some schema. Maybe it will be one of the invoke in scope of the set functions, which will be one under another. So I totally agree with you that they were more structured in terms of readability and so on.
Yeah, okay, we'll move on. And we have another question. In custom cross-field validators, are they going to react on changes in either field or only on main one?
It will, as far as I understand them properly, they will react to the change of that particular field to which we apply the validator, and the field that we are just reading in scope of this validator as a signal, right? So In my case, I was applying the validator directly to, let me try to find it. I was applying the validator to confirm, and I was reading the value of password. And right now, whenever the password change or the confirm, I expect this to be triggered. If some other change, I'm not expecting this validator to be triggered, and I think it will works like that.
So do you think untracked will work in case you want to skip a trigger of the validator on the field change?
I think it will work maybe, but I don't think so there is need for. So didn't test it, don't want to say, but you don't need to. You don't have it. You don't have to use it this way.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the new signal form validators are also good because they react on both like form control changes, which was not always the case in case of the reactive forms, which in my opinion was one of the biggest causes of issues in application synchronization.
Yes, definitely. You are right.
Okay, we have another question. Is it still possible to disable zoneless mode in Angular 21? We are currently migrating from Angular version 13.
Yes, I think like because we say like it's zoneless by default, but doesn't mean you have to disable the zone, right? Because you still can use the zoneless by keeping the zone as part of your application, because one of the way to go zoneless in existing application is just removing the zone.js and like not install it as a part of your application and provide all of these experimental zoneless change detection and so on, right? So if you stay with normal change detection and zone.js being like part of your application, I believe you should be fully zone, but that's my opinion. It's pretty rare case when you actually want to stay zone instead of migrating from zone. So
yeah, I agree on that. In case you are writing code with good practices, then migrating to zoneless shouldn't be that big of an issue. Okay, we also have a few other questions, so maybe unrelated. So defer works like media queries in CSS, as I understand.
Yeah, something like that. With this new threshold to define, we can consider it as some media queries right now, but slightly differently measure, because I believe when we take a look at this defer here, right? So it's the threshold like root margin between the visibility, but probably in terms top down, not left right. So media queries are not being applied top down as far as I understand, and here it's probably more this direction. Yeah, but we can consider it this way, but I don't know if we can define in media queries something like if you are 100 pixel from some specific element, behave this way, because that's what it actually says. So if you are 100 pixels from reaching my defer block, let's you start lazy loading, right? So a little bit different, but there is maybe some analogy.
Yeah, and by the way, this defer is a great feature, longly awaited by the community. I remember the pull request, and it got many comments that people just need this free shot on the defer.
Yeah.
Okay. We can move on into the next question. And it is a statement whether the signal forms validations or libraries like Zod will win. What do you think?
Zod is probably needed for performing the validation of the typing scope of the schemas, right? Am I right, or I'm like?
I think so. Yeah, you're using Zod on validating.
I think it would there wouldn't be any kind of the fight, but rather Zod will extend what can be done, right? So you can write like the extremely simple validator completely without the Zod and the schema, but then actually you can write the great validator for your model by utilizing the schemas and Zod. So I don't for some reusable. Yes. So as I said, for some models, which validation being maybe part of your business logic, maybe some complicated validators or reusable validators for your models, I think it's worth investing your time for schemas and ZOT. But for some extremely simple validators, I think that people will write more this inline kind of the validators. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions and we'll wrap up. So a very fair point in my opinion. Angular Signal Store is now able to handle large applications with state management without relying on NGRX state management for Redux. What do you think about it?
If like Angular Signal Store, as far as I understand, so it's the one also like being provided by the NGRX, and I believe it's able to like build some great Angular application without relying on the Redux. I think like plenty of the applications get rid and get out of the Redux. So it's not only about the Angular, but I believe like Redux is no more so popular in scope of the React itself, or from where it was coming. Right now, like React Query and some other libraries like gaining them wave of popularity and being widely used. And I think it's same to the Signal Store. So like, what is the purpose of the state management with Redux is that it provided in the root, it's single source of truth, and it's have the pretty well spread responsibility between action, reducers, effects, signals. So right now with your like Signal Store, which also can be provided in root and being the single source of truth, which lets you to create like the smaller slices of provided in root signal stores, with the possibility of creating like the custom features where you can keep everything in the dedicated file as you will do exactly with effects and so on. It provides a great way of creating the global state based on the Signal Store, because with NGRX based on the Redux, everything was global, but we don't always want everything to be global. So it's much more flexibility with Signal Store.
Yeah, I agree. You don't always need an NGRX in your application. I mean, NGRX Store, of course, not Signal Store. So we also have last question, which was partially answered in the chat.
Yeah.
So can you use Signal service on large applications?
Yeah, we can. I don't know maybe what is actually the Signal service.
I think it relates to a pattern where you just have a single service with Signal that stores the data and exposes it. So it's like previous pattern with behavior subject path in Signal manner.
Yeah. So also I see like Samurai is mentioning about the resources. So maybe you can also share with us. We are happy with that you are so proactive here, because my opinion about the resource and like utilizing them as part of the services is that the resource only lets you read the values. You cannot update and so on values utilizing the resources, and reading the values is extremely rare case in like enterprise application. In enterprise application, you have to read, update, delete, post, I don't know, some optimistic, pessimistic updates performing on your entities, depends on the strategy, and none of them is possible actually in easy way with resource. If you would like to do it, you will have to mix the resource with some extra pattern, which for me calls that I prefer to use this extra pattern as a single pattern in my app than mixing like two patterns like resource and NGRX Signal Store or something like that. So yeah, that's my opinion, because I saw you mentioned of combining Signal with resources.
Okay, and it was the last question. Thank you for many detailed answers, Matt, and
thank you. Nice. Yeah, it was pleasure as always to be part of our community. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening, if you are based exactly same time zone as we are, and hopefully we'll see during our some next upcoming events. So bye-bye.
See you, Matt. Okay, so as you may expect, that is all we had for today. At this point, I would also like to remind you that we are always open to your contributions, so in case you're interested in writing a blog post for the Angular.love blog, we would like to welcome you in our crew. Just go ahead and click this link, submission form in the chat, and fill this. Okay, also remember that we are releasing the Signal Forms workshop soon. So in case of the Black Friday, we have an offer which basically gets you a pretty good deal. You get 1 ticket and 1 ticket free in case you pay for one, or in case you want just 1 ticket, you get 30% discount on the single ticket. Check the info in the chat. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of the Angular.love community and for your excellent attendance today. Don't forget, our next event is coming up on December 11th at 6 p.m. CET. We'll be broadcasting this one online and also live from Warsaw, and it will be featuring speakers such as Adam Romański and Somaya Erradi, who will be discussing the 2 topics of accessibility and the new resource API and the Angular. Don't forget to follow us on the social media, stay updated, and until then, stay curious, keep coding, and see you soon.